Sean?
Conflict. As the world teetered on the brink of anarchy, a new hope arose. An elite international task force charged with ending the war and restoring liberty to all nations. Overwatch. Soldiers, scientists, adventurers, oddities.
Ever since Overwatch 2 has been released, we have been pushed to a new type of era when it comes to Overwatch content. With the original version of Overwatch 1 no longer existing, we're at a different point in time now where we're no longer able to go back in time and play those past comps that we used to. Personally, I will start with Season 1, as a lot of people don't really remember that season, as that season was really the starting point for where people were starting to learn Overwatch itself. There was no defined meta yet, but there were certain compositions and heroes that people would play that were ultimately busted. Like I said before, a lot of the characters that were played were sanely busted, or there were some mechanics going on in Overwatch 1 and during its first competitive season that were absolutely stupid, horrendous, all the words in the dictionary. During Overwatch 1, at least during Season 1, it was a completely different kind of game. We still had the 6v6 setting, we only had 21 characters, and a lot of the characters that we see nowadays are completely different from what they were way back then. They were completely different characters. Not to start off this video, I want to take a look at some of the most played characters and what defined the meta of Season 1 of Overwatch. With the introduction of a brand new competitive system being added to Overwatch, there were many players racing to reach the top of the ranks using their best characters or what they thought at the time to be the best characters to use to climb the ranks. But to start off, we had the supports and the tanks. We had our staple characters for the tanks line. We had Reinhardt being played a lot during this because he was the most ground-based tank. Simple, very easy to use. There wasn't any special mechanics to him. He just had a shield, you hold it up, you defend for your team. We had Lucio, who had an insanely broken speed boost ability. It was, I believe, like at 50 or 60% than what it is now. Plus, he had way better healing. And then there was Mercy, who was like the main healer. She was a lot better at healing. Her damage was a lot stronger. And her ultimate was actually her res ability, which she could res her entire team up to 5 people. Zenyatta was also played sometimes during Season 1 of Overwatch, but you saw him a lot less because he took a lot more skill. What made him really good though was his Discord orb, which applied a 50% debuff to the enemy team. Plus, his healing was pretty decent too, but although his orbs traveled a lot slower than what they do now, and he only had 150 base HP. As well, there was one other support in the game that we don't see as a support anymore, and that is Symmetra. Symmetra at the time had an auto-lock DPS beam, which was her primary fire. She had her right-click ability, which was her orbs, which travels a lot slower back then, but I believe still did more damage than what they do now. And then her teleporter was actually her ultimate, which allowed, I believe, up to 9 charges for her teammates to teleport from spawn all the way to where her teleport was. And one of Symmetra's previous abilities on her E was a ability where she could grant 25 shield to all of her teammates just by clicking the ability and using it on them. Moving on to the DPS category from the support and tank lineup, we have some variants of characters ranging from the offense and defense. Mind you, I say offense and defense because back then in Overwatch 1, DPS wasn't a entire lineup together. They were split by offense characters and defense characters, and what the developers thought at the time would be better to play on defense, and characters thought that would be better on offense. Anyways, with Season 1, we had a really broken set of characters, starting with McCree, who is now known as Cassidy. He had a lot of broken abilities. With his primary fire, it didn't have damage fall off whatsoever, so if you were good enough, you could absolutely out snipe a Widowmaker at really long ranges. Plus, his right click defender hammer was really, it had a really great accuracy, plus it did a lot of damage. And then as well, he had a flashbang that was still in the game, which, as we all know, was very notorious for being very annoying and busted. Moving on from Cassidy, we are now on to Genji. Genji was absolutely broken with an 8-second Dragon Blade, and he also had many techs that would amplify his brokenness. He had a lot of different abilities like his triple jump that people would use a lot. He had a lot of animation cancels when it came to canceling his Dragon Blade after it being finished, or just to get a quicker attack in on the enemy. And then there was one extra thing that made Genji even more broken, which was his ledge dash. The ledge dash basically being where Genji would dash up on a ledge, but the ledge would actually carry his momentum and launch him nearly to the skybox of the map, where he could just drop down on the enemy with an 8-second Dragon Blade and kill everyone. And you can't forget about some of the notable characters like Tracer. Tracer's damage back then was absolutely insane. Her pulse swarm had a bigger radius as well. And the ultimate generation back in Overwatch 1 was absolutely absurd. So she could get her ultimate really quick compared to some of the other characters even back then. As well, I want to mention back then in Season 1 of Overwatch, there was no role select. So anyone could play whatever role they wanted, tank, support, or damage. And then there was no hero limits, meaning that if you wanted to, you could play double Winston, double Genji, Tracer, Lucio, whatever you wanted. It was up to you and your team to decide who you wanted to play. There was no such limits back then. Often in the pro play, we would see comps like double Winston, double Genji, or Tracer back then, which was actually surprisingly a lot stronger back then because there was no such thing as hero limits. Pretty soon after, a couple seasons later, there would be hero limits added in to sort of help balance out the game. As well, back then during the first season of Overwatch, there was a completely different ranking system, but different from what we have today especially. In Season 1, we had a ranking system ranging from 1 to 100, and there was no rank names such as Bronze, Silver, or Gold. It was just a number system. The highest was 100, the lowest being 1. Around the 70 mark was around where you would start seeing top 500 ranked players. And in order to see who was like the top 500 players at the time, there wasn't a leaderboard system yet, so you will see a gold emblem next to like their player card of the person you were playing with, or on the team or in the enemy team. Also, it's very important to note that back then in Overwatch 1, a lot of the characters that you see now played very differently than how they do now. For instance, Reaper. Reaper used to have soul orbs back then that he would have to like sort of eat in a way in order to heal himself instead of his lifesteal that he has now in his base kit. As well, Torbjorn, who back then would give out armor packs similar to like Symmetra with her E ability with her shield. He gave out armor which would give 75 armor to those who picked up the armor. Now you can't mention Season 1 competitive Overwatch without mentioning the coin flip. The coin flip system, basically if both teams reach the objective during like let's say a payload match, then the game would do a 50-50 coin flip to see which team would be attacking and which team would be defending. It didn't matter if you had more time or less time. Based on the coin flip, you would either attack or defend. So if your team was worse at defending and you got defending, then you had a better chance of losing that match instead if you were attacking. As many can tell, the system was very busted and very broken, and as soon as Season 1 of competitive Overwatch ended, the system was entirely deleted. But that really does it for Season 1 of Overwatch. There really was no hard to find meta. There was just little glimpses of systems and characters that were sort of broken that really gave the name of the season coin flip meta, which hence the name, came from the coin flip system. But yes, let me know what you guys think. Should I do another video like this? Should we talk about Season 2, Season 3, whatever you guys want? Let me know what you think. Did I miss anything? Just put it down in the comments. If you guys like the video, leave a like, comment, subscribe if you want to, dislike the video if you want to. Whichever you want. Thank you guys for watching though either way. If you made it all the way through, you have a nice one.